Alrighty, welcome in. Here we go. Here we go. Um, we're back. Just to recap, we did the midweek Magic Phantom Bot draft. We drafted a three-color deck, and we don't get to keep any of these cards, but it was really fun using them. We kind of focused more on a counter life gain sort of strategy that stayed very, very low to the ground in the two-drop category, with a flying finisher and some life gaining guys over here to sort of help stabilize at the back end. Never ended up really utilizing the Moldering Karak as much as I thought we were going to. Had a real nice synergy between these two cards that I got excited about and thought, yeah, hand over the plus ones, get the bunch of plus ones and turn the Blood Researcher into a massive creature. Um, Never really played out the way I wanted it to. Things that really were the key to our wins was this card right here. Humiliate allowed us to anticipate what our opponent was going to do for the rest of the game, essentially, at least the parts of the game that were the most important, and it allowed us to disrupt it by taking out what we thought the play that was going to affect us and our plan the most. In most cases, that was the next card that we thought they were going to cast. We took a removal spell out of one, and we took a creature that was a 1/4, I think, out of another. And so overall, we did pretty good. We went about 500 in the games that we played, and for a set that I know nothing about, I feel like that's pretty strong. The people that beat us were the ones that really understood how to utilize the spell system, especially the blue-red deck seemed to be like the strongest deck in there. And once they gained control with the spells, the value that they get from casting all of these two-drop spells was just greater than anything we could overcome. A lot of times our plays were, a single 5-mana creature. Um, we didn't get a lot of games that suddenly allowed us to hand dump or really overdo it. We utilized a lot of these big play tricks, and were able to get a star pupil during one of our wins to eliminate, I think, like 4 of their different creatures just because he kept getting stronger, and we forced them back. They're back against the wall. I think they were down to like 6 or 7 life, so they had to continue to block. And there you go. Um, Rewards that we got from this event. If I go done, we picked up a zombie rare card, which was kind of cool. It basically creates a zombie whose power and toughness is equal to the toughness of the creature that we sacrifice to make that happen. And we also picked up another zombie creature. So we have the beginnings of a zombie deck with 2 rare cards, both of which were pretty exciting. And then we got an all will be one mystery cosmetic. Would rather have gotten like a card or an avatar, something that I would affect more decks, because right now we just have our basic avatar planeswalkers. We don't have anything new and exciting, and we don't have any pets, and our card sleeves. We used our we used our codes to open up these card sleeves. And there are some really fun ones that are out there that have some mystical effects. This would go good with like being a zombie deck or a black deck. Would have been fun to pick up some of this stuff, but that's okay. We are not very far into the bronze category yet. Just up one kind of spot, but we need blue or green spells in order to cash in our 500 gold, and if we can capture a win or two, we can move the needle here, and once we get that, we should be able to have a pack, because this is going to give us the 500 mastery experience, and this is where the mastery experience goes. We only need 150 more. So this says cast 25 red or green spells, and this says cast 20 blue or green spells. I look for sometimes these challenges and see if there are some overlaps between the two, and both of them say green on there. So if I pop into my deck, I do happen to have a Woodsy Artifact green mono green deck, which is really going to help increase the number of green spells that we cast. So just taking this into standard play, and seeing what we can make happen here is probably the best answer. I don't think we've picked up any new rare cards that would be of extreme use, but we can sneak a peek. The Howling Piper is an extremely powerful card. For 2 mana, you get to take a creature card from your hand and put it directly onto the battlefield. And if it's a wolf or a werewolf, she untaps. The wolf and unwerewolf part is kind of interesting, but I don't have a lot of wolf and werewolf kinds of creatures. This is one that I would be able to do. This is another creature card, and this is another creature card, and these are also creature cards. So is this, although I don't think I would want to cast this using her because you would lose out on the 2+1/+1 counters that are kind of an important part of making this thing work. So in the wolf deck, really kind of neat. You can put out things like Tovolar. You can put out things well, Tovolar, we've got 2 of them, but that's kind of what we could cast in this deck. What would we take out in order to, I mean, think of this more as like, cost you 4 mana to cast. On turn 5, you can only spend 2 mana to cast a free 7 mana kind of thing. So it's a 5 mana savings on turn 5, and you're cheating this forward by about 2 more turns. That's on there. You'd be cheating this one forward by the same, and you'd be cheating this one forward by 1 more turn. So ideally she goes here, and maybe she'll end up kind of creating a new spot, but maybe the quick draw dagger just doesn't hold as much, or the Paxong pups. I hate to remove an artifact and lose all of our artifact synergies, and this thing creates an artifact. This thing is a solid drop that helps us ramp towards our bigger threats. I think we're losing their Papsong Pup, and I think we're gaining our Piper. Our average is at 2.9, and our land's at 24. And these get stronger when there's more of them around. This one is an artifact that will help pump our Wormlet, and this is going to help us ramp. I am fine removing this ramp card in order to create this ramp card. I think this one can only ramp us 1 step, and this one can ramp us 2 steps in a perfect on-time world. Let's give it a shot. Let's go. Okay, so we can't really, we're not desperate for wins. If we get a win, that would be great, but we're just trying to cast 10 more green spells, and we're trying to cast 25 red or green spells, right? And it says we're already at 17, which is pretty good. So we'll go to standard play. We'll pick our Woodsy Artifacts. It's our second strongest deck. We've got numbers on them. And there wasn't enough decks that like using the hearts to kind of like keep them at the top made a lot of sense. So let's go with our Woodsy Artifacts and see what we can accomplish here. I would say my experience with this deck is that it's a little slow, like all green ramp decks are, and it's a lot of fun at the end. It can be very challenging or stressful experience to get to the end. You know, you need that card to drop and draw, and there's not a lot of extra card draw that's in here. And our removal is clunky too until we get the big guys on the table, because it's all this kind of epic confrontation stuff. So we've got a rampy card at the end, and we have a 2-drop. So, and we've got 3 mana. So what we can do is just keep this, and until we'll toss that out there until, yeah, we'll toss that out there too. Until some of these larger creatures hit the deck, it's not likely that we're going to use our epic confrontation too often, right? Definitely like getting this guy out there. We can attack with our Wormlet. We're not moving the needle yet on the Wormlet, unfortunately. We could use 4 mana to cast this, but I kind of like the idea of using our 4 mana to cast this and then sneaking it out, so to speak, right? Phyrexian Arena is going to give them card advantage. This is a mono black control type of deck. I would expect more removal to start to show up and them to start to take out these creatures along the way. I'm okay with that. I would rather them use removal now while we're at the low end before we get to kind of how our pieces work together. So let's see if they take out like a Wormlet or something. Yeah, just kidding. All right. We're going to do this creature. And if we attacked, the Archfiend would essentially just kill us. And it's not like I've got an epic confrontation to back it up at the back end. He loses one. So he's got to kill us in 3 turns, or he's got to have a proliferate or something like that on the deck. I think that that's probably the end of our Wormlet, most likely. Yeah. And we lose some life. Don't worry, we're going to try to gain some life here. Alright, it's a nice setup. It's a really nice hit. But if I pull this, I can toss this onto the battlefield. I can use my epic confrontation. I can take this guy and make him fight that guy. And booyah. We take out their strongest player, and we click resolve. And we click next. And we attack with our Jukai Trainer. So that was stabilizing. I can use the Tyvar stand to save the life of the trainer if I need to, but I think if they get blocked, she gets the +1. So yeah. Next. She only has 1. She needs like 5. Or at least 2, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Whenever you create a blood token, if you control 5 or more, you transform. So she go. Resolve. End. Our turn, threatening 12 damage on a 14 damage player. Think he's going to gain 2 life and get to 15. And if they don't affect the board here, we can attack in for lethal because we'll have 4 extra damage that we can sneak in. That would make that 10, 12, 14. Oh, we're going to be just 1 short, but the Phyrexian Arena. The Phyrexian Arena will take the -1/-1 for the card draw. So we're going ham if we don't affect the board here. Let's see what happens. Six and 6. I think we just save the... We just save him. Oh, I could have snuck him out for more, but that's fine. I mean, it's gravy at that point to do it that way. I would rather be a little wider and have gotten the extra damage, I believe. We definitely are threatening lethal at this point. He's going to need to get 2 more bodies on the deck in order to make this work for him. If he can't get 2 bodies on the deck because he's a black control-y deck, we might see his head explode in 3, 2, 1. Good game. Some things are, I don't know, they just go by plan, right? Very good deck that we went up against, and we totally played our cards to the highest value possible. Gotta love it. Like when we can go up against some of the meta stuff, and we can hold our own, and we can win on day 3 inside Constructed Standard. That's just so good. Just to recap, opponent played a rare artifact in the Phyrexian Arena, played the Archdraus Fiend, which is another rare card that was out there, played one of my favorite sagas that exist in black, and so all of his cards were extremely high value. I don't think he made any mistakes or took turns off. But I do think that his deck was constructed to be more control-y, was more about proliferating and removal, in my opinion, than it was about, and kind of keeping the Archfiend out there, than it was about necessarily going wide. And for us to use our brand new creature that we put in the deck, which was, I forget her name, but the Howlpack Piper, she was instrumental in creating an opportunity where for just 2 mana on turn 5, we cast a 7 mana creature that gave us 6 health back. Excellent return on investment for 2 mana to go out the door. And then we still had enough mana, since we had needed 4 mana to accomplish this. We still had 2 more mana in order to utilize the Epic Confrontation, which gave us the +1/+2, which happened to be just 1 enough. I mean, we would have done it even if we would have been losing our our Boulder Branch Golem, but it was really nice to be able to keep the Boulder Branch Golem and be able to now suddenly be threatening to attack at 6, which is what he was throwing at us. So an amazing 2-for-1, really, between the health coming back, between the threat hitting the deck, and the removal, all for a total cost of 4 mana. And the 2 mana still got a chance to attack. Just pretty good. Just pretty good. So I like the synergy that's happening in this part of the deck, and I like how it really is going to increase the value of these fight spells quite a bit by getting some of these bigger guys on the deck earlier and not leaving these things sort of hanging in our deck as a missed opportunity for a longer period of time. So Howlpack Piper might be the rug that really tied the room together. That's what we're going to call her. The Howlpack Rug, because she ties the room together. All right. Only negative side about that game was we did very quickly win. And when that happens, you don't get a chance to cast as many green spells. That's on there. Good ramp here. We're going to keep 7. I think the dagger is more of a trick at 3. We'd much rather be able to cast some of this other stuff. We can put the Rustvine Cultivator out. He isn't tappable, and he requires a tap at the end, so I won't be able to put like anything on there to tap him up, and on the next turn cast one of these 3 ones, which is a shame. But if we're looking at a black and blue Dimir deck, if he was to, let's say, cast a toxic 1/1 creature, it would have been perfect for our Epic Confrontation. Would have given us something to do. So that would have been cool. Instead, we're going to do nothing turn 2, and he's going to regain the front, so to speak. I definitely like the Gwenna Eyes of Gaia as an opportunity to maybe double cast next turn on there. The idea being, 3 of the mana can get used for the Jewel Thief, and then 2 of the mana can get used for the Paxon Pup. That's a better ramp strat to go wide in, even though it doesn't really stop the Void Hybrid. It does sort of create a nice hand dump that's on there. We could use our Epic Confrontation. We're controlling. Okay, so we got the mana, which means we can throw something like the Pup up, right? And then we can do the Epic Confrontation in order to remove this while it's just in the way. Doesn't move the needle as far as I wanted to, but it kind of slows this down. He's going to have some cards that he gets to play that draw him cards and hurt us on this run. Or he's going to cast an amazing Planeswalker. Not overly concerned about that. I do think that a phased out, it can't be blocked, but he can block, by the way. We've got a total of 4 mana. Throwing a dagger on there to make this Pup go 2 doesn't really do what I wished it would do. But you can see if we were going to do the Jewel Thief and we had Gwenna Eyes of Gaia on the deck, we could do the quick draw dagger as well as it. And if we draw 1 more land, we'll be able to attach that at the same time. No reason not to. Alright, so opponent has a Planeswalker on deck that will draw a card and discard a card as he pluses up. Um, just doing everything he can to prevent us from being able to do it, and I guess he doesn't care. Okay, so a little change of plans. We can throw the dagger. We can attach the dagger. We can throw the Jewel Thief next. We can attack and remove Planeswalker. And our Paxong pup is just out here doing damage, baby. Nice. He can't be blocked. I'm assuming there's some ninjutsu kind of effect that he's trying to accomplish with this. We would gain 2 life back, and we would still have our Quicksilver that we could equip for 1. So definitely the right play there. Take your 1. And we have a Bramble Worm. So, uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, never mind. We're okay. We're okay. Throw the Bramble Worm out, enters the battlefield as a 7/6, gains us 5 life. Very, very difficult to deal with. Each opponent sacrifices a creature unless they discard a card. I would not have a card to discard, so casting the Bramble Worm would be, and losing the Jewel Thief would be better in my mind than not casting and losing the Jewel Thief or losing the Bramble Worm. So we're going to go like this, and we're auto-paying it. Thank you, Jewel Thief. Gaining 5 life, attacking, and moving on. Yeah, that's fine. We knew that was coming. We would certainly like to take our Trampoly guy, but he's going to get... Interesting. Okay. I'll take the +1/+1. I have an idea too. We're gonna attach a kunai. Okay. That's what happened. We're gonna attach a kunai to this worm as well. And the reason we're gonna do it is when the Long Reach of Night transitions and comes in, she'll have 4. This would get us 3 of that damage. So kind of a neat way for us to maybe remove the leftovers from Kaito, or it could be a way for us to remove a creature that comes onto the board. We're certainly threatening lethal, and we have trample at this moment. This is going to turn into 5 on there. Alright, we could ninjutsu this in, and that would be stupid. It's not going to do anything, so we're just going to attack. He's going to block, and he's going to take 4 damage. And if he doesn't come up with an answer for the Bramble Worm, like now... What did you do? He's already tapped. Oh. That was a misplay. Yeah, it was a misplay. So, blue-black Dimir control doesn't have a lot of capability, apparently, of removing a creature that was already on the deck, although I thought he was. And that was all we needed in order to gather in the blue and green spells and earn the deck. And so tomorrow, there'll be another new deck. This deck, though, comes with new cards. The Celestial Regulator is a flying, enters the battlefield, chooses a target creature you don't control to tap. If you control a creature with a counter on it, the chosen creature doesn't untap until the controller's next untap step. So don't just pause the turn that you cast it and not block. Don't also untap and fight, and then we'll take another turn off, get a chance to attack you. So the ideal place to cast this is before you attack, right? Cast it just before you attack, tap one of their creatures that would be a blocker, attack, don't worry about it on the flip side, attack again, then he shows up, right? Really good way to remove something off the board for 2 chances, especially when we've got 3 of them. You know, you could just really kind of like think about the board state on our last game. All of our eggs were in one basket, right? The worm had all the equipment attached to it. That thing got tapped and stuck being tapped, not tapped after the fact. It would have been pretty difficult to handle. The other half of the blue-white spells that they're going to give us is a flyer that's a blade. Blades are when we say they're 3/1. So there are different organizations, right, of the health that add up to a total of 4. That's one ways that you can kind of see. So typically, if it's a 2/2, a 1/3, or a 3/1, that's worth 2 mana. Then the text is going to be worth more mana, right? So if it's got one of these key text words here at the top, like flying, trample, menace, any of those kinds of things, what you're going to find is that's going to cost you at least 1 more mana, unless it's a rare card, and then you're getting that stuff for free. The other thing is whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures with counters on them, you get to gain a card draw. So a very glass-jawed blade, right? Anything will kill it if it gets in the way. But if you control the skies and only worry about the skies, dishing quite a bit of damage as a flyer, and if there's multiple guys out there, giving you an opportunity to even gain card advantage which for blue can be literally the name of the game, right? You don't care about your health, you just care about your cards, because your cards can control the board state and prevent the other team, the other opponent, from getting an opportunity to attack you. So more cards equals more control. More control means you can care less about your life total and you can win. So we would be looking at a blue-white control-y flyer deck. That's what we hope they're going to give us. They give us the deck over here, which is cool. We did earn a free card and all of this stuff. And a bonus Metropolis Angel that's not a blade any longer. This has got the little A next to it, which makes it an alchemy card. So the theory is, in alchemy, this card is much stronger, and it's also 1 mana more expensive. We did get some Inspiring Overseers for the white flyers that we were looking for, and we got a vehicle that only requires 2 to crew, and whenever the unit attacks, you get to return a target creature or vehicle card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. Unfortunately, none of this stuff looks like that. Draw 3 cards, then discard 2 unless you discard a basic land, so this could be a +2 for 3 total mana. We already talked about the Regulator. This is one of my favorite cards. Especially if you've got angels that you're going to be dealing with. So we did get a rare card that is very, very good. When you're casting all these flying rare cards, I can love that. This is a conniver, which means that like you're going to get a draw card, and then when you discard a card that's not a land, you're going to get a +1/+1 counter. Achoo! Thank you. Trainer is also very, very good as a growing. Borrowed Time is a removal spell that we get to see used all the time. And Sigarda's Summons. There are decks that this thing is beautiful in. Decks where you're handing out +1/+1 counters. The format that we were in before, the Strixhaven format, had a ton of the +1/+1 counters going out. It seems like the new formats give you temporary boosts, that are like 3 and 4, as opposed to long-standing boosts of +1 or plus, like +1 counters or +1/+1 times 2 counters, which kind of affect the whole game. I do like Sigarda's Summons, though, in general, if you're able to get a lot of little guys that are out there that have it. Also a good removal spell to go along with some good removal spells. And so, in general, this deck looks pretty good. Lots of rare cards. They're giving us a mythic card along the way. We can do a rare land over here, which we're going to utilize quite a bit. And then some slow lands. I'm never a big fan of these slow lands. But this deck has a ton of things in it on the rare side of it. March of Otherworldly Lights is kind of a funky spell. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you have to exile any number of white cards from your hand, and then it costs 2 less. You get to exile a target artifact, creature, or enchantment with a mana value of X or less. The biggest strength of this is the ability to exile the enchantment. I feel like enchantments kind of slip under the cover a little bit. You have a lot of this stuff that return a target permanent to its owner's hand. Like, you have a lot of things that would be very positive, but not everything affects enchantments. So getting rid of an enchantment would be huge. I have never figured out how to utilize this card the right way. Essentially, you make your character into whatever is already on the board, and it could be a character that's on their side. If you pick a character that's on your side, you get a shield counter, which means you get a free attack. Even if they block it, it doesn't matter. The shield counter disappears, but the creature doesn't die. It can be a good way to look at it like a removal spell. So for 4 mana, you capture one of those 3/1s, right? And then they dual attack, and when they dual attack, you get to draw a card, and then your 3/1 undercover operative shield counter gets taken away, but your undercover operative is still alive, and so you still have a 3/1. They still get benefits from doing that, and there's just very little risk for you associated with it. So it can be a way to trigger some of the other cards that we got. Overall, the flyer deck, Angelic Accountants, because they have counters. Haha, accountants. This is what the deck looks like. We do have an extra 2 or more land, which we would put in there instead of one of these guaranteed to be slow lands. We could add the extra regulator, a 1/4 flyer for 3. That creates some tapping opportunities. We could add the extra undercover operative. We could add the extra initiates, the extra courages. We do have 2 Giadas. We're definitely putting that in there. I'm not a huge fan of this card, to be honest. I would rather drop the informants down. I would love the extra removal on there. We can definitely continue to remove some of that. This is that artifact vehicle that didn't seem to fit quite a bit. A 3/3 that puts a +1 counter on up to 2 other creatures for 5 and is flying. So remember, a 3/3 creature should cost you about 3 mana. Would love for it to have one other piece to that puzzle, but it's okay if it doesn't. This is a 5 mana spell, so are the extra things that are on the card besides 3/3 worth the 2 mana? That's how you decide whether it's a good card or not. Being a flyer is a good situation. Being an angel is going to be really good because Giada is going to toss a +1/+1 counter on our angels when they come in. Getting an opportunity to drop 2 +1/+1 counters on other creatures. Each one of those is probably worth at least 1, but more than 1 mana that's on there. And we're also getting extra flyers, which will help us trigger some of our other angels that are over here. I am a bigger fan. Is this an alchemy setup? We're going to go to standard. Okay. And then that's going to make these 3/1s instead of 3/3s. But that's a smarter way to do it because that's where we're going to play it. I am a big fan of the Quartermaster. I'm not sure if the Sigarda Summons is something that I'd like to get rid of in order to go to a 4th Quartermaster. We're going to be slowing down our deck a lot, but gaining the card draw here and a creature that's on the board, and the ability to have that second attacker. It all screams to me that that's the way to go. Angelic Quartermasters, I mean, essentially what we could do is we could just say, like, I'm removing my groundlings because getting a +1 counter on the very beginning, not that exciting. I do like this one, though. Save your character, remove their largest character. Pretty strong. We have a total of 4 of those. Do I like those more than this? I think so. Alright. We increased our creature count here and here. We removed our creature count here under the Raffian's Informant. So we're kind of dancing pretty close to the original makeup of the deck. This is what bothers me about this card. We need 2 blue pips to cast it. And I can easily imagine getting to 4 mana and not it being split down the middle at 2 and 2. And if that's the case, and we're not split down the middle, then I think that the Undercover Operative, I mean, we can't copy Elspeth, so it would be a Angelic Quartermaster in which it wouldn't get the ETBs that's on there. We can't turn it into an enchantment, and this one is the closest. So essentially, this is a 4 mana 3/3 or a 4 mana 3/1 with a shield counter on it, and that is just not very good. I do like protection, removal. Feel like there's more things we could do with that card than that, and it kind of feels like this. I like this. Getting a little bit more of those +1/+1 counters, getting an extra flyer, getting an extra target if the Sigarda summons shows up, giving Elspeth something better to pump. Could definitely put some lifelink up there. You know, we're not always going to get a chance to cast these 2 cards. A lot of times, well, the games will just kind of live down here in this area. So we want to make sure that like we're not completely worthless, you know, while we're winning. I think if we protect our Parish Blade Trainer and our Hopeful Initiate until we get our flyers out, meaning they're not attacking directly or using them as chump blockers. If we do it that way, or you know, we protect them like this, where we are using them as chump blockers, but we're casting a 2 mana spell in order to give them indestructibility. What that's going to do is that's going to really slow down the ground assault while we take over the skies. And as we take over the skies, we're going to be able to slow them down on the ground as well. We're going to be able to gain some life back and continue to gain card draw, which means that we should be able to maintain card advantage, even though we got rid of our card draw spell that was in there. Planar Incision is a flicker spell, and it works really nice when you're flicking in cards that you've already cast. So this spell doesn't do us any good until turn 5. That's not really exciting. Feel like I would rather control the board this way more than try to control, you know, like the ground, so to speak. Because the reason I say it's turn 5, it's a 2 mana cost, right? Ideally, to get the most amount of value out of this card, you want to flicker your own creature. But you don't want to flicker your creature after their summoning sickness. Because if you do it that way, if you flick them after, right, what's going to end up happening is they're going to go back into summoning sickness again. And so you're just going to end up having this extra turn off. I never really like sitting there for 2 turns after, you know, with not affecting the board, essentially, just kind of sitting there as a blocker. So ideally what you'd want to do is you'd want to cast something like your Parish Blade Trainee or your Giada. Each other angel you control enters the battlefield with an additional. If the Giada is on the deck, you could do something like the Inspiring Overseer. This is, you know, a much better flicker effect, because you'll cast it, it'll come in, gain that life, draw that card, and then you'll immediately flick it for 2 more mana. So 3 to cast, and then 2 more mana to flick. By flicking it, it goes away, it comes back. Oh, you must have just entered the battlefield. Have another life. have another card, and gain a +1/+1 from the planar incision. You went, as a 5, like, is 5 total mana worth 2 card draws, 2 life gains, and having a 3/2 flyer, right? No life gain, 2 1/1s on different creatures, and you're a 3/3 flyer. So, yeah, I mean, kind of a way to take this Inspiring Overseer and turn it into a better card than the Angelic Quartermaster with the Flicker technique. That's pretty good. So, what am I doing? Am I talking myself into this thing? Like, um, this Perish Blade Trainer and this Hopeful Initiate will become flyers that are 4/4 base mana stats and suddenly are angels, which means Giada's. Um, I don't think Giada's +1/+1 counters are going to hit, but these angels are all going to come in with +1s, which would also include this angel for a second +1. So, in a perfect situation, these Overseers, which are, kind of the weakest card out of all of our creatures, work really, really good with the Planar Incision. If we're going to choose not to stock our Planar Incisions up because we feel like the card's too slow and it doesn't really do anything super positive for us until we get to like here, what could we do? We could remove an Inspiring Overseer and grab another Elspeth. And that's pretty solid stuff. The other thing we could do is we could remove a Perish Blade Trainer in order to grab our second Elspeth. And we're up to 3.0 with 25 lands. I don't love that. We've really gotten away from the blue, and we've really moved towards the white quite a bit. I kind of like this better. We still have our Trick, but he's not a main part of our deck anymore. And we still have our Elspeth Resplendence, which are going to do a good job of helping us, pause the attacks from hitting us in the face. So I would play this deck. I would be very curious to see what other flyers we could add to this deck instead of like the Trainer. We could have the Incisor Glider, which is a 1/3 flyer. It's not an angel, but it does come in with an opportunity to sort of block and help control the skies, which is nice. But I am looking to synergize. And if I recall, there's a Steel Seraph floating around somewhere over here, which is just like an angel. Check. Gives away other things. Is a 3/3 body for 3 mana. Check. In our colors, check. Can be a late game threat at 5/4. Check. Can offer life gain in order to help us stabilize with some of these blades. Check. Too many boxes are getting checked to say, let's not take that card. So I'm going to remove this as a 3 mana, considering that the prototype version of this is also a 3 mana, and say that like this will help kind of maintain what the spend or the timing of our deck would look like. That's a big ad. Here's another flyer. When they enter the battlefield, mill 3 cards, put a plains card or a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them milled this way into your hand. If you don't, you get a +1/+1 counter on the Chaplain. The reason why this card is nice is it sort of replaces itself as far as cards are concerned. And if it doesn't, it's going to give us another Giada, give us another Inspiring Overseer, another Celestial Regulator, or it's going to just have its +1/+1 counter, which ideally is what we want. We want the 2/2 flyer in this category. Should be a little bit stronger than the 2/1 flyer in this category. That does draw us a card. Kind of does something similar with it. So we're giving up the +1 in order to gain the opportunity to kind of select a what we're going to pick, right? At least we get a better selection. I'm gonna I'm gonna keep the Inspiring Overseer for the ETBs. Toxic Flyer that hands out flying, and if they've got +1, gives a +1/+1 just for a turn to another creature. None of our stuff is toxic. Doesn't really play very well with what we're looking. A toxic training Griff Rider. It's kind of neat. What training does is when they attack, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the creature. That sort of built-in +1/+1 counters sort of really help take off all here on the upper deck. It will get to 3/2 very quickly. Um, it would have a hard time getting beyond that because like maybe Elspeth could give Blade a +1/+1 counter, which would then therefore give Griff a +1/+1 counter. I don't mind that. I like the card draw effect here. But as a blade, as a 3/1 blade, this may not be the way to roll. We need it, but we have. Griff is kind of neat. A flash flyer can be really useful to get that extra damage. Creatures you control get +1 until the end of the turn. Kind of neat as a board pump for the late game. Would be a weird way to hold on to it for 7 mana, but I can see in a stalled board how the Ambush Paratrooper can truly, truly change the name of the game. If we were doing the Toxic theme, this thing is pretty excellent. 3/3 flyer that creates 2 more bodies that are on the ground. They can't block. The Soul Blade Glyph is a flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. Definitely not worth it. And then a Dual Striker in the Corrupt deck. A 4/4 flyer for 5 mana is already pretty good, but if you happen to be corrupted, getting a 4/4 flyer that double strikes is off the charts, right? So you'd want to guarantee corruption in a white deck. We're going to really lean to the heavy side of this deck, okay? We're going to double our Elspeth. We're going to double our Sigarda summons. We're going to focus more on our flying creatures. We've got 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 flyers that live in the 3 mana spot. And so what we really need to do is focus on using our removal, our indestructibility, and our removal spells to do everything that we can to take us out of the 2 mana sort of rhythm, because they'll be casting 2-for-1s while we're still casting 1s that are in here. So we'll need to tap those down, and we'll need to do our own dirtling in the 3 mana spot. It'll be all the way till turn 6 before we get an opportunity to double cast. If that's the case, what we'd really like is to make sure that we've got some things that change the name of the game at turn 4 and at turn 5. And I feel like that's what we've accomplished here, right? Throwing an Elspeth down would certainly buy us that extra turn, even if she's just a target for everybody else to attack. I do think, though, looking at the top 7, putting a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from among them directly onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it is a very worthy way for us to sort of drop her in and get back the value of the 5 mana. The way that I would look at that is to say that's 3 mana immediately regained. And so is Elspeth worth 2 mana if she takes on the attention of the next attack? And the answer is absolutely. Like, not much you could do better. So Planeswalker comes down, we're going to use the -3, and then she's going to absorb the next attack wave while we stabilize. Way we stabilize is by giving out some lifelink, maybe casting some cards that help us gain life, maybe flicking some cards in order to gain an extra card and to gain some life. and in order, and then using things like maybe hopefully gathering and something like this to help change the board state that's on there. I'm gonna say that the Angelic Accountant's deck looks pretty strong compared to, let's say, Jank City or the Wolves. It definitely looks a lot stronger than the Wolves. Um, we don't have to play it ever, but I do like making the adjustments to it in order to get an idea of what a different looking ramp deck would fit as. 3.2 average, a lot of bomby, kind of heavy stuff between the Planeswalker creatures and the Sigarda summons that exist that are up here. So, overall, I would say a blue-white deck with 22 creatures and a majority of things either training up, gaining flying, gaining flying, gaining flying right here. We're going to be attacking in the air, and we're going to be getting a lot of +1/+1 counters. And I think that overall, this deck has some legs. I like 22 a creature. I like having, removal, protection from removal, removal, and I like the synergy with the +1/+1 counters all the way through the deck. +1/+1 counters, hands out +1/+1 counters, gains +1/+1 counters, gains +1/+1 counters, definitely trains to gain +1/+1 counters, can be flicked to have a +1/+1 counter put onto it, can also be a good target for a +1/+1 counter from the Angelic Quartermaster. Another good target, help control the deck, a good way for us to stabilize against 2-drops that are maybe doing some damage, good way for us to gain some card advantage, gain some +1 counters, and give a stall. So this is more of a defense card, and this is a severe offense boost and a severe offense boost. Keeping it. I hate the slow land conversation over here. I would definitely say that we need to do 12 and 3. We've got 2 more fast lands, so we have 5 blues that are fast, and we only have 4 total cards during the first 3 turns that require 1 that's on there. So between our first 7 draws, our first turn would be our 8th draw, 9th draw, 10th draw. 10 draws, do we have a 1 in 6 chance of getting a blue card. In order to accomplish that, you would divide that and say that you would need a total of 10 to make that happen. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 12 blues with a mathematical, 1 out of 10 chance of getting it. So we're pretty much on time for our Planner Incision. If a lot of these blue cards lived down here in the 1 slot, we would be behind. If they all kind of exist in this 2 to 3, we're ahead. So this Planner Incision is the one that mathematically could find itself in trouble. But I'm not overly concerned because my game plan with my Planner Incision is not to use it until turn 5, right? It's really a card that lives in this turn right here because that's how we're going to use it with the Inspiring Overseer. Theoretically, you could use it at turn 4. You cast this on the first try, but then the summoning sickness problem, getting reset happens on the Inspiring Overseer. So it's much better to put these 2 cards as a combo 5-drop than it is to do them piecemeal in the 3 and 4 slot. As just for rhythm, which means that if I've got a Planner Incision and I've got an Inspiring Overseer, I'm okay holding onto those cards and casting things like the Griff Rider or a Borrowed Time in order to get there. So, yeah, a good deck. Not the deck we're going for, but I'll take a free deck that has 2 mythic cards that they give us and tons of flyers, which we need. Just a lot of good things that happen. Phyrexia All-in-One is currently at 14.8% of the deck. It says that we have a total of 155 cards of the new set. Gives you an idea of how effective the jump-ins really are. We kind of have been leaning into the jump-ins picking the packs that are from the newest set because we felt like the commons and uncommons are the most powerful compared to because of power creep over time compared to the common and uncommons on decks that were built based off of cards that were in the mill category, the new Capenna category, like the treasuring category. They're a little bit older and they just have like maybe one less damage or maybe they attack one less along the way, and that adds up. Like especially when you look at like a whole deck of everything being one less, you're really going to be a whole turn behind as you play the game. So gaining the Phyrexia All Will Be One stuff on the early side helps us beef up our decks quite a bit. Unfortunately, we're not using them in the one deck that we're using that has some corrupting capability that's in there. But that doesn't mean that we're not using the rares and we're not excited about going in and getting free packs that come from the Mastery Pass. Again, we didn't spend any money. We're just getting the free stuff across the top. If we had 3,400 gems, we could come in here and gather in all of these other things that were down here at the bottom. Super worth it, by the way. If you go check out the store, they have I think, a deal. We'll come back to this. This is a pre-purchase, but yeah, you can get a welcome bundle that'll give you 2,500 gems and one pack of each of the latest 5 sets that's not the current set that's on here. That gets you really, really close to a Mastery Pass. The 2,500 gems, I unfortunately didn't do correctly and used them to buy packs with mythic capabilities, and that was just terrible. That was like the least bang for my buck, so to speak, with the $5. Oops, I'll come back to this with the $5 deal, but I would highly recommend spending $5 to get 5 rares and 2,500 gems. We may end up doing that after we've gotten through enough of the jump-in packs that we feel like it's time for us to do some drafting, right? Especially if the events that are currently running are a draft for the latest set, the Phyrexia All Will Be One. I feel very confident that I could walk into a draft and do, a average cost of 3 wins, maybe 3.5 wins to every 3 losses, something that's just a little bit over 500 as far as my record would be concerned. And what that would mean with 2,500 gems is like 6 different drafts at minimum, and those 6 drafts could turn into, we know, something like 30 rares. And a ton, like just really kind of flesh out almost the entire set for us as far as Phyrexia All Will Be One. So you can accomplish quite a bit. You'd be netting over 35 rares because you're going to get a rare in each one of these packs. You'd be netting almost an entire set of Phyrexia All Will Be One's common and uncommons, and a solid amount of their rares. At least a third of their rares you'd get one copy of. And so I think there's like 62 rares, if I'm not mistaken. So you'd end up with like half of the rares. And that's a really great place to be with $5 into the game. You definitely have to work towards it. You have to play the game in order to make it work, but it's pretty cool. Now, if this is not your goal and your goal is to grind, you're not really a limited player, you don't really trust your instincts to be able to utilize those 2,500 gems, and you think that you would probably take a pretty significant loss unless you're only average 1 win or 2 wins in those drafts, and you would only be able to get 3 drafts done. It's still a great value, but you're going to lose about half the new set value that's on there. So you might want to consider leaning into something like this. The reason why you would pick this is you're going to get the Mastery Pass, right? For $15, you're going to get the Mastery Pass, and by just playing the game at 2 or 3 games a day, you're going to grind your way through all of this. It's going to give you a player draft token, which you can use for one of the upper level drafts, things that are cost twice as much, but then they have twice as much payoffs for the wins that you get. You're going to get some mythic rares, which will help you design the perfect deck. You're going to get all these fun styles, which is good. You're going to get these rares that are down here at the bottom. The Might Overseer has turned out to be a pretty excellent card. There's another one over here, the Serum Sovereign, which I haven't seen anybody using. I've tried multiple times to use it. It's a spell flyer combo, but because it costs 5 mana to go out, it's really for very, very control-y kinds of decks. Um, think like draw, cards that like bounce players and draw, bounce players and draw, have all those proliferate effects built into it, and then boom, you can get an oil counter put on this, and then you can use the oil counter to create draw advantage later on, as well as having a 4/4 flyer. Um, Pretty cool stuff. Let's keep our computer not so toasty. There we go. All right, done and done. Um, gain access to all the rewards on the Mastery Pass. Um, a 5/4 Kinzu, which creates a 1/1 token copy of a creature after it dies. Why is this good? You really need to look at the ETB effects of your creatures that are dying to see if the ETB effect is worth more than the stat line that's at the bottom. Kinzu comes out in the Rat deck for me. I like the Rat King, who looks at the next 5 cards, and you can collect as many rats that you want out of those 5 cards. That's a good effect. It's a much better effect if it was 10 cards instead of 5. So on turn 3, you can cast your rat and collect in a bunch of rats. On turn 4, you can build up your board state for all of those rats by casting those rats with the 4 mana, so you get 2 more out. You choose to take the turn off and don't attack with your Rat King. And then on turn 5, you and all those new rats all attack. You have Kinzu on the board, right, with your 5 mana on turn 5. Rat King, of course, is going to be the lightning rod of that attack. And if you had rats like the Blight Belly Rat, which comes with a +1, or comes with a toxic 1, and then the Rat King gives it a toxic 2, you're sneaking 2 toxic per rat into the creature. Your Rat King dies, your Rat King comes back, your Rat King allows you to look at the next 5 cards, draw a bunch of cards. Hey, maybe you grab another Rat King out of there too. Who knows? But you still have a Rat King on the board. You still have those extra toxic creatures, or extra toxic pips stacking on all of those other rats. And the only thing that they've accomplished by using a removal spell or by making a trade or blocking with your 3/3 Rat King is that he's now a 1/1 Rat King. But the 3/3 was never the impressive part of him. It was the go wide strategy. Kinzu of the Bleak Coven is a phenomenal card, and I think that she's going to see a lot more play with people figuring out how to utilize those ETB effects to their fullest extreme. Kinzu's the rat deck is the only one that I've gotten a chance to build around her, but I do like her quite a bit. You'd also gain access to this guy who maybe completes the equipment deck. Whenever an equipped creature you control other than this creature attacks or dies, you can attach all equipment attached to that creature to this guy. So kind of a great way to say, like, almost like a samurai kind of effect. I've got all my equipment on one dude. He goes in there, he does the most amount of damage, he dies, and then boom, Ryok comes in to sort of replace the body that was in there. I think there's a neat strategy that exists in the equipment deck that works that way. I haven't figured it out. Super cool. Unfortunately, there's a glitch in the game that doesn't let you kind of see it, but a cool attracts a card sleeve, which is fun. And then another Goliath Hatchery, which I think is kind of a cool one, especially if you do a green-white token deck. The 3/3 green Phyrexian Beasts at turn 5 work really, really well with a Mondrake. That's at turn 4. And then the Mondrake will double these and turn them into 4 3/3 green beasts. So there's a green-white token deck that is like perfect for that kind of card. But otherwise, it's a lot of packs, it's a lot of cosmetics, and it's a lot of gold and gems, avatars. Like, there's a lot of cool things that are in here. So, my advice is, if you're going to play this game for a long period of time, this one-time purchase of $14.99 is excellent. If you're still just trying out this game and you're not sure, but you're fine with spending a little bit of money, a $5 bundle here is going to give you well over a month's worth of, progression And during that month, you're going to get a lot of cards that's going to make this thing a lot of fun. It's going to allow you to open up even more. You'll probably earn quite a bit more. And so this $5 bundle a lot of times leads to this $14.99 bundle, right? Because you don't have to make the choice on the Mastery Pass. You can buy it at any time. So you can get, like, let's say a whole month into it. You accomplish a little bit more than like a level a day if you were playing like 4 or 5 games a day and making your wins. So you can be up to here and go like, you know what, $15 for all of this stuff now seems a lot more worth it. You spend the $15, you gather in the 3,500 gems, you buy your Mastery Pass, and then a lot of the gems get replaced back in the Mastery Pass. You know, you can replace back gems by using these tokens and going in to do some of those drafts. You probably get another 1,000 gems back. If you can go 500, because that's what 3 wins in that draft pays off. And so it just starts to look a lot better. But anyway, we're going to stay in the free-to-play world for right now. We accomplished our quest for the day. We accomplished our new deck, and we spiced it up a little bit. We didn't have a lot of things to add to it, but we definitely reorganized the deck up to fit a little bit more of a higher-end kind of curve, as opposed to trying to make it as aggro-y and as low to the ground as possible. So we'll see if that was a good idea. And it's time for us to open our pack. We're up to 15.5%. We got a Cruel Grimnark, a really fun card to use. You know, I use this when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, and for each opponent who can't, you gain 4 life. I use this a lot in the control-y kind of aspect. We saw how making the opponent discard a card is worth at least 2. You know, at least 1, maybe 2. Having a 5/5 Death Toucher is extremely difficult for an opponent to deal with. Having Death Touch means that this thing can attack freely, and if they end up multiple blocking, you're killing everything. So I love this thing a bit like a bomb in the common category, right? A Phyrexian Cleric, 5/5 Death Toucher that only costs us 6 mana and does a lot more than what 6 mana should do, in my opinion. The 5/5, if it was just 5/5 and it just had Death Touch, the 6 mana would be great. Losing the card or possibly gaining the 4 life, just total gravy. Fun card to use, can be used as a clunky removal spell, not extremely clunky, but a little clunky. More likely to be utilized as a, you know, go wide, kind of toxic the guy out strategy. Vigilance, as long as you control 2 or more artifacts. Turns out these mites token artifact creatures, so these kind of cards can work together in the white deck. Terramorphic Expanse doesn't do a ton for us, but there are some sacrifice decks where sacrificing this actually triggers some of the sacrifice stuff. So Terramorphic Expanse can be utilized to sort of smooth out some mana and gather in an extra trigger for, like, let's say, I think a Thran. Is our Vran deck a sacrifice deck? I think it might be. So there's a reason for us to actually stick that into a deck we already have. And we got a Kaya. Maybe the second most powerful card next to Atraxa in the new set. Each opponent loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life, and that's her +2. She comes in with 6. Exile target creature enchantment, and if it wasn't an aura, you get to create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 1/1 white spirit with flying in addition to other types. Great way for you to steal something on their side of the board, especially if it has an ETB effect, because it now is on your side of the board with flying, and the ETB effect comes to you instead of them. She can do this twice off of cast, but she costs 7 to cast. So you really need to be focused on ramping into Kaya, in my opinion. If you're just waiting to naturally have the 7 mana to cast her, the game might be a little out of hand by the time she hits the deck. She's hexproof, which means that people can't cast spells on her, although my experience is there's not a ton of removal for planeswalkers. Because of the mirror match situation, Black does have Sheoldred's Edict, which will help get rid of those, so she kind of dodges the Sheoldred's Edict. with the hexproof, which is really, really nice. I overall think that, drawing 2 cards and then an opponent gets a chance to scry is the least powerful of her 3 abilities, but she doesn't need a lot of plussing. And then for them to go down 3 and you to go up 3 is a 6 health swing, and that's her plus ability. And then she could probably eat an entire attack at 8 loyalty and do it again on the next turn, which is another 6 loyalty. So she prevents you from getting hit. You're gaining 6 total life. They're losing 6 total life. You can just see how Kaya really changes the name of the game for the opponent. So I would say worth trying to build a deck around for sure. Nahiri Sacrifice is a card I've never been able to utilize correctly, so we're just going to ignore it. And say, Kaya, pretty good. Do we have white and black ramp? Do we have a white and black strategy that stands on its own 2 feet? Currently, we do have a white and black strategy that stands on its own 2 feet. So, does Kaya fit into this deck? We don't have an enter. This is not worth doing on our side, right? There's not a lot of synergy here for Kaya, but we are not trying to toxic things out. And that's where the Toxic 2 text really comes into play here. I would be fine dropping down a Nimriser Paladin in order to add in a Kaya into this deck. So we're going to do that. Okay. Our curve is only at 2.8. We have 24 lands. Kaya just being a sneaky way to suddenly take over this game makes me a lot happier actually about this deck. I mean, the Ravenous Necrotitan should be here, right? The fact that it's here is just insane. The Defiler of Flesh allowing things like the Kaya to get cast on turn 6 makes for something really fun. The Defiler of Faith also allows us to cast her a turn early. So there is a world where our 4-drop and our 5-drop allow us to cast our 7-drop. We will cost ourselves 4 life, but we can immediately gain back 3 of that life. These Defilers and Kaya work kind of like ramp. I'm game on. I don't usually think of my 4 and 5 drops as being the ramp mechanisms, but they certainly allow for a lot more of this stuff to happen. And I like the idea of, using these card advantage kinds of pieces. We don't have much on the removal side of the equation. Each target, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls and all tokens of the same. I would say this is my least powerful card, and this Savior of Allenbach is a much more powerful card to stick into it. This Flash Flyer 3/3, when it enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control this card. So making our Ravenous Necrotitan, this is a flyer that grows, this is a flyer that protects. I like it. I like it a lot. We're not always trying to kill everything in this deck. And I like the idea of having a little bit more consistent removal opportunities with the Savior of Ullenbark. He'll have plenty of things to help train him up. We've got lots of big creatures that are over here. We could even utilize the Coyote with the Savior of Ullenbark as a way to continually have the Savior of Ullenbark attack. It would have indestructible on it, so they would have to use a spell that's not a green fight spell in order to remove the Savior of Ullenbark. And the Savior of Ullenbark can capture in quite a bit of things. One thing that's kind of funny about the Savior of Ullenbark is if you think that he's definitely about to die, there are sometimes some clues that tell you that that's about to happen. If that is about to happen, you can, when he attacks, exile your own creature. And the reason you would do that is obviously you're going to gain your triggers, right? You're going to also get that card to come back. And if you had this thing cast as a 3/3, it's going to come back as the 5/4 version of it. So it's kind of like a way of saying, like, oh, you're going to take my 3 mana away? That's okay. I'm going to just invest that 3 mana right back into the Steel Seraph and get the value of that 3 mana immediately back. So there are some reasons to kill the Savior of Ullenbach. We could kill our Savior of Ullenbach if we had maybe snuck in a creature that's in here. I really don't see another thing to do, but he's just a tricky card that has a lot of fun pieces to it. And at 3 mana, we took out a 3 mana card that wasn't going to do nearly as much for us as what the Savior does. So I'm going to take it. The Annex Sentry is great, but it only takes out something with 3 or less. And I think that that actually plays out more than you think, more often than I would think. We still have these 2 Planeswalkers, and once you start down a Planeswalker category, it starts to become addictive. Definitely putting out +1/+1 counters is good, but none of her abilities really synergizes with the rest of this deck's abilities, and so I'm not really going to touch him. This would be the other thing that we could do when the Graft exploits a creature, which means he's going to sacrifice that creature. You get to destroy a target Planeswalker. At the beginning of your upkeep, Graph Reaver deals 1 damage to you. So a 2 mana 3/3 is phenomenal. A 2 mana 3/3 that could, let's say, sack a Crawling Chorus, a Yoshian Frontliner, and in turn take out a Planeswalker on their side is kind of neat, especially because Ran would also give us a trigger that's in there. I think that I like this more than the the other guy. He doesn't have the kind of synergies. He helps things come out of the graveyard, which can be nice, but I'm more willing to play with this idea and say that my Graph Reaver is a nice sacrificable target and we got a lot of sacrifice targets to go along with him. So he just kind of continues to move the needle a little bit forward. These cards that you want to protect because they give out a lot of things later just don't work in this deck quite that much. These are the things that we want to protect. These are the things that we want to sacrifice in general. Alright, so we've done some deck building and we've improved our 2 over here. We've actually improved our artifact deck just a little bit, but we are still accumulating. We are not ready to try to take what we've sort of put together into this constructed rank world just yet. Let's take our 1,000 gold. Let's go to our jump in. Let's claim our prize. Oh, I guess we forgot to claim our prize after getting our win yesterday. Nimrazor Paladin. That's funny. We already have like 3 of those, so that's our 4th. We're going to resign. Just to remind, we picked up an Urbask Forge, which is a great card. Can go really neat in a red-black sacrifice strategy, which we might consider doing. We picked up a Furnace Strider, a Magmatic Sprinter, a Axiom Engraver, Free from Flesh, Churning Reservoir, all of these cards have uses and can be a part of that kind of sacrifice deck that we would be building. Um, Another good way to get people to blow up their artifacts is for you to blow up your artifacts. This little crawling chorus, after he dies, creates a very expendable artifact for a Shrapnel Slinger to get rid of. This is not an expendable artifact, and this is not likely to be an expendable artifact. This guy makes two that are very there, and this Flensing Raptor tosses them into the air, but they are still very much expendable. This guy can drop off a Might to create a Might. Don't know why you would do that. Maybe you would want something that ETBs more, and so you could drop off your Urbask Anointer in order to put your Indoctrine Attendant out there. You take the opportunity to have your Churning Reservoir drop a, you know, not a poison counter, but an oil counter onto the Indoctrine Attendant, and then bring your Urbask Anointer back in order for it to deliver that damage again. Overall, it was pretty easy to get our win, if you ask me. Those two happen to work very good together. 1,250 gold. We've got enough. We're going for it. Now, Oily again, Urbask Forge again, could really help complete some of our strategy that we were looking for that's over there. I don't know off the top of my head the other two, so I'm going to pull up my list here and see what the Saboteurs is going to give us. The Saboteurs are Imoen the Trickster Fiend. Sorry, Saboteurs. Lots of specializing going on there. I'm out. Contagion. Contagion is our blue-green, which gives us either an evolved Spinoderm, a 5/5 green card that when it enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters on it, it has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters. Otherwise, it starts with hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can remove an oil counter from it. Then if it has no oil counters on it, you have to sacrifice it. Goes very, very good in the blue-green oily combo. Or the blue-red, I should say, oily combo. Don't love the fact that we're getting paired up with green. Other cards that we might be able to get are the 2 Proliferate Rares. Azuri, Stalker of Spheres, is a 3/3 for 4 mana. Super, super, super expensive. Don't like it. Tekathal, I've tried so many times in so many decks, was one of the first mythic cards that I picked up. Again, not really very good. So, Evolve Spinoderm with blue-green Contagion, blue-green Toxic Stuff, or another oily guy in order to round out some of those oil decks in the red side of the category. Kind of a tough one. 1 forge by itself, you can't make a deck around. 2 forges, you can. I think we stay with this because it brings us much closer to building a deck that we can use. Okay, we got the Hex Gold equipment for Mirrodin strategy. This thing for Mirrodin basically says that when you cast the equipment, it automatically creates a 2/2 and attaches itself to it. So this would be a 3/2 flyer that gets cast as a uncommon card for 4. I think that's a little bit shy on the stats, but what's nice is it's going to leave behind the wings. A lot of times wings cost quite a bit to put onto another creature. In this case, they only cost 3 more mana to put onto another creature. And you can start to see flying hexproof Spinoderms can become pretty scary stuff. That gets involved on there. The other thing you could do is you could stick the wings on like one of these things. The Urbask Forge creates very, very strong big guys. If he's got a big wall of people that can block it, tossing those wings up there, watching them die, toss those wings back on the next one, watch it die, you've just done 15, 16, 17 damage, with 3 or 4 or 3 mana that you use twice in 2 different turns. Pretty good. The rare in this is Jordan First Gold Warren, a less than impressive rare card. It gets plus plus, plus whatever x plus x, where x is equal to the number of equipped creatures you control. And then if the power gets to become 4 or greater, you get to draw a card. Um, I think Jork Hadeen works best if you can pump him up. Not necessarily relying on you having equipped creatures that are going wide, because what I've noticed is that the equipment deck has a hard time staying wide. It can go wide, but it goes wide with a lot of 2/2s. People are very, very quick to attack those 2/2s. You're very, very quick to sacrifice your 2/2s because you still have the equipment left behind. And so nobody's interested in saving your width on the board, and that creates sort of a tough spot for Jork Hadeen to become very familiar. He needs to be in an equipment and go wide deck to really utilize both halves. If you can pop him up, though, he becomes if you can just boost him up to being like, let's say you put 2/2/2/2 counters on him, if you have a spell that does something like that, or if you can equip him with something that's going to give him +2 in the power category. There's a first strike trample piece of equipment that probably exists inside this pack that would accomplish that. Then you're going to start to see some card advantage really, really quickly, and that can pay off very, very big in the equipment deck. I think what is missing that most people don't understand is the card draw that's necessary in order to make this thing work. And they get enamored with the idea of like what I just described. I'm just going to use my 3 mana to do a kind of a janky trick. But while you're doing that, the other guy is putting more bodies on the board, and it can be very tough for you to catch back up. Let's check out the other 2 packs, but we've talked a lot about Jork Hadeen, and now I'm starting to talk myself into it. Mirror Hall Mimic is a 4 mana copycat, just like the 4 mana copycat that we just had before. It's in addition, it becomes a spirit, and then you can disturb it, which means that you can cast it from your graveyard in a different kind of form. But essentially, you get this card twice instead of having the shield counter that the other, blue guy that we just got was. Nothing spectacular. It would be very difficult to build a deck around something like that. Finally, in high tech, we have a shot at Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, which we have one already. We got kind of lucky in a pack that we opened up, and I say that like it really isn't that lucky. Unfortunately, I have a hard time figuring out how to use Tezzeret on offense. I draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards unless you get rid of an artifact card. It means you want everything in your deck to essentially be artifacts so that you can gain a card with his +1s. You get an emblem that says whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped, you get to draw a card. Again, getting him up to those +1s is probably the name of the game so that you can toss that emblem that's out there, because his ultimate ultimately becomes an amazing card advantage. But by himself, like he doesn't take over the game by himself. Target artifact becomes an artifact creature. If it isn't a vehicle, it has a base power and toughness of 4/4. Another way for you to take like your Norm's Wellspring and just toss him out there and turn him into it. So he's got a -2 effect that reminds me of the Unctus Retrofitter. But overall, a 20% chance at getting that guy is just not that good of a chance. I think we're sticking with the Hex Golds, and we're going with the new set. Again, power creep makes the commons and uncommons something worth grabbing. Since we just did this, we kind of have some sense that we were going to get a Churning Reservoir. We had some sense that we were going to get a Free from Flesh and an Exuberant Fuseling. This, Jork Hadeen, we knew was coming our way. This is the first strike and trample, but not the +2 side of it. So this isn't the equipment that we're looking for our creature. And boy, did we end up with a ton of creatures in the 3-drop. And unfortunately, not nearly enough equipment in this to justify the Jork Hadeen as like a guaranteed strength. We've got 1 +2 +1. This would be great on our Jork Hadeen. A Furnace Rider is just a really great card in general. Menace reaching 5/5er, not really anything that's going to be writing home about. Watch it win the game for us. Definitely like this. Hasty 3/3 that comes in, creates an extra body on the backside that blocks. You can really kind of sneak in and attack. Like, your board states look even. You toss this guy out there, you attack. Yeah, he's probably going to die or get traded off, but the other team's going to die, and you still have the 1/1 to block on the backside of things. So can really change your fear factor of attacking in and give you a reason to say, like, I know on turn 4 we're all going, so you can try to build your board state up a little bit. Speaking of building board states up, um, a phenomenal card if you've got enough equipment in your deck. Unfortunately, though, we don't. We've got 1, 2. This is great, by the way. 3, 4. 4 total pieces of equipment. That's just not enough. That's just not enough. So I think the name of the game here is using the churning reservoir to drop some stuff on, drop some oil counters onto some characters, using the Jorkadin and keeping him alive in order to create a card draw effect, and using our Arabesque Forge as a offense that's on there. The more that we protect our creatures that have oil counters on them, the better this Crackler can become. This Leonid Lightbringer isn't going to have a lot of oil counters on them, but the Bladegraft Aspirant makes all of our equipment 1 cheaper, and it also can take a very, like this only costs 2 mana to cast if you have an Aspirant that's out there, and if your 2/2 dies, you can drop it onto another like Aspirant for 1 less, which is just a lot better. So that can make things like the Wings a 2 mana equip cost. It can make the Bardiche a 3 mana equip cost. And this guy, has a reason to be the guy who collects all of the equipment. This guy kind of does too. Like, I'd love to have a double striking 5/5er that's on there, so I can kind of see why a big body makes a lot of sense. One thing to consider when we want to cast our Churning Reservoir early, we want to cast our Arabesque Forge early, and if we do that, we want to spread out our Churning Reservoir, not just stick them all in the Fuseling, right? Because that's just a very glass-jawed creature that's going to get disappeared very, very quickly. But instead, toss them onto the creatures that we think we want to keep, right? Probably want to keep this, probably want to keep this, probably want to keep this since the equipment cost is so high. Probably going to keep the Crackler itself. The Aspirant and the Lightbringer are excellent targets for it. And then when we cast the Anointer, now we're going to use it as a removal spell, essentially. And so for 4 mana, we're going to get a removal piece, and we're going to get a 4/2 body that's on the board. Yeah. So we need our Bardiche to go with our Jorkadin. We need our Furnace Strider to be around to kind of do our sneak attacks. We're going to use these 2 hasty upper end creatures to sort of like take a stall that might exist on the board. And I don't think that we're going to be as aggressive getting rid of our equipment. 2/2s. We're going to kind of protect our 2/2s a little bit and drop some Churning Reservoir stuff on them in order to make our Anointer stronger, and in order to make sure that we have time to maybe hold Jorkadin back for a turn or 2 and get him a Bardiche or something like that on the board. I can imagine a world where I cast an Aspirant, this thing becomes a 4 mana spell. On the next turn, I cast a Bardiche, it hits the deck, and then I cast Jorkadin, and then I take my Bardiche on turn 5 and attach it, because it's only cost 4 to attach, but 3 if we have an Aspirant on the deck. And I toss the Bardiche onto the Jorkadin, and now I've got a card draw, right? A 4/3 card drawer that in general is going to get +X when he attacks, so he could end up being quite a bit greater than the 4/3. All right. Best laid plans getting put to the test. We're not at the beginning of a season. A lot of people stop doing jump-ins and just kind of start going to the packs after you've accomplished a lot of acquiring. at the beginning of the season, the jump-ins gain, 10 new packs, and they remove 10 from the set that's kind of going away. We have a slow land and not a lot else going on. That we wouldn't be affecting the board until turn 3 at best, and it would be a temporary effect. Nothing works in that hand. This is better. We can still cast our slow land first, but we now are affecting the board on turn 2 and turn 3, and that is enough for me. So we're going to get rid of you. And as planned, our engraver gets out there. Should our crawling chorus choose not to attack, we can then remove the oil counter when we become tappable on the next turn. This turn, though, would be shocked if we're gathering a removal spell. Blue-white, toxic. Very interesting combo. I am not familiar with the blue-white, unless it would be, let's say, it's blue-green for the proliferate toxic piece. Huh. Okay. Kind of a fun, sneaky way to jump in here would be to throw the magmatic sprinter, drop the oil counters off, and move forward. I do think, though, that affecting the board just a little bit more than what they're capable of is better. So with them doing a Prothetic Prism that just isn't going to do much, us having plenty of options, we don't necessarily need a card here in order to come up with options. We're just going to stay with our board presence, get our little attack in, and see what happens next. We can't cast the Bardiche next, so we're casting the Magmatic Sprinter. I do like the idea of dropping off the Magmatic Sprinter's stuff onto the Axiom Engraver, not attacking with the Axiom Engraver, and cleaning out a card, but it would be remove the Bardiche or remove a land, and I'm not desperate for that to just disappear. Aha! You figured out a way. I'm perfectly fine with this, by the way. The reason why I'd be fine with this is because it cost him 2 mana to remove that thing, so he didn't get a chance to do anything for the future, right? I, on the other hand, could toss my Magmatic Sprinter down, attack, get the 3 damage, bring it back, right? And now my Axiom Engraver has got a ton of oil counters onto it. And so it can kind of continue to be a blocker. I'm down. I think that that's the right play. We're still going to get 3 damage in. If we did the Hover Wings, we wouldn't get the damage in. And we wouldn't be improving the goal here. So we're going to drop that. We're going to click Next. We're just going to attack with the Sprinter. Required updates available. We will be disabling new matches in 10 minutes for those who have not updated. That is fine. We don't need that new one. And then he's going to return back, and that is A-okay with me. What that does, too, is give me an opportunity to get our Bardiche down. It takes away his removable capability, and he just isn't threatening an attack that can get to us. So I am going to stick a stop right here. Because if I can get past his attack phase and my Axiom Engraver does not end up getting tapped during that time, then what I'd like to do is utilize it in order to maybe clean out a card, right? Totally fine with this too. Quick pass. Alright, so there's my stop. He didn't attack, so it's time for me to use our deal. The 5th mana here will allow us to cast our Bardiche. But I kind of want the Hex Gold Hover Wings on the next turn, and I definitely want to keep my Magmatic Sprinter as a way to sort of toss things out. So I'm okay with tossing the land card in hopes of gathering in something better. Not going to utilize this right now. just go cover the skies. I don't want him using any kind of tricks that get the skies opened back up. So we'll click next, we'll click no attacks, and we'll click end turn. We are definitely covering him up very well. Unfortunately, we're not sneaking in damage at this moment right now, but that's okay. That's okay. I mean, he's doing one thing at a time. He's got himself a nice ramp of 5 mana now. So I would expect something like that. He's gonna kick like a crawling chorus, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm gonna let the crawling chorus go by because I don't have the mana to use the Free from Flesh right now. The Free from Flesh would give the +2/+2 that would be necessary to block this and make this work. So I'm going to say pass and no blocks and let him get damage. Right? Now, no reason for me to miss an opportunity to clean through some cards. The Sky Warden... I can't cast him right now, but he might be the right answer. I don't have the Jorkadine, so the Bardiche doesn't excite me that much. And we gathered in 2 more mana, right? So, here's the theory. We drop the Sky Warden out. We... I got another idea. Let's pretend like we don't want to do the Sky Warden for a second, because he's got removal, right? If we do the Magmatic Sprinter right now, we can toss the oil counters back onto the Axiom Engraver. We can attack with the 3/2, and we can attack with the Sprinter. And then depending on which one he picks, we can use our Free from Flesh to go on there. So as long as we keep 1 red there, this is a good play. It puts the pressure on the Kai now. Whenever you can put them on the pressure now, it's worth so much more than putting pressure on a future turn. Putting pressure on a future turn is what that would do, but not a lot of reason to do that. Now, a couple things I could do. I could use the Free from Flesh to put the 2 oil counters on this creature just to have one, or I could put them on the Magmatic Sprinter. The reason why putting him on the Sprinter would be neat is the 2 damage would make its way in, and the +2 oil counters would allow the Magmatic Sprinter to stay on the board. And so for 1 mana, it's like I'm getting a chance to cast this little guy again. Resolve. We're going to keep our Engraver out there. Yep. So the Porcelain Zealot is threatening my my Magmatic Sprinter, but not if I put my Hexgold Halberd on to the Magmatic Sprinter. I do think that the Porcelain Zealot removed also removes the Crawling Chorus as a threat. And so part of me wants to protect. That's okay. Resolve. Get an extra poison counter. That puts me in Corrupted. If I'm him, I've got 2-3 mana left. I'm hoping to have one of those flyers that give +1s to everything on the board. And then the Porcelain Zealot giving him +2 on the board gives him a very powerful attack with his Crawling Chorus. And I think that that's probably the best answer that he would have. So I'd hope that getting to Corrupted there had an extra effect. Well, not much I can do there. My man's all about that removal. Yeah. We went for the damage. Pass. If you ever want to like figure out like where you are, take this number and double it, and subtract it from 20. So 4 times 2 is 8. Since 8 minus 20 is 12, we're in the lead, but we're barely in the lead at this moment right now. It wouldn't take much to change that equation. Okay, so remember I talked a lot about like wanting to make sure that we gain advantage now as opposed to advantage later. We can't do much with this guy Dosed that's on here. So these wings and stuff like that, not going to be in a great shape. But they are making my Rebel Salvo a lot cheaper. So what I can do is cast this, right? I don't have a great attack on the way in here, but I do have a way to block that crawling course if I ever needed to again. But I'm not getting rid of my Rebel Salvo, okay? Instead, I'm going to use it probably on my Porcelain Zealot that's over there. It is an instant spell, so I can probably just cast it now. I'm going to say no attack and just cast it now. Just remove that. That way I just don't have to think twice about that. Let him draw his card, get his reset, and see what his board looks like after it's all said and done. He should trigger that. Things are going to get a little quiet here on my end as I change out my battery. Hey, we're back. Good. Alright, so the board looks pretty good. Pretty good. He's going to have a hard time attacking with his Crawling Chorus now. The Unctus Meditech would gain a artifact to go turn it into a +1/+1. And then when that artifact taps, they would also be able to gain a creature card, or a card. He used the 1 blue pip to do it, but this is exactly what I was talking about. There's no real reason for me to let this thing survive. Since it's already the artifact, it's just going to die. It's going to come back, but he got an opportunity to gain some cards that was involved in all of that. I think that's probably his best play, right? Like, I can't imagine that was better. I might have kept it as a blocker with a 5/3 Menacer that's kind of threatening. At this moment now, he does not have a way to block that card. Okay? Giving this first strike and trample would be nice if it was necessary. But one thing that I'm paying attention to is the race, right? My man over here can give me 4 damage and give me a toxic counter. I could equip the wings to my Axiom Engraver, which sounds crazy. I can attack with Menace and not get blocked and do more than half of his damage, right? And if I do it that way, just that extra little piece of damage is going to be a huge change, right? So if I take the wings and stick them over here, and I take this and stick it over here, and then say all attack, we are threatening major lethal at this time. He can't really get me to 10. Make this into a 4/4. He can't really get 13 damage in before I get a chance to attack again. And that's... A part of me is wondering why we have a +1 on this guy. You're amazing. Well, and that's game, right? Just to show you what else we would have done, we would have used the oil counter here, and we would have gone all attack and just obliterated the guy. So, what did I say? The 5/5? What good is that? It's amazing. In a game of limited, having a 5/5 on the deck is very, very valuable. Having the ability to hand them keywords like trample, first strike, and flying is insane. And I think I'm going to claim this prize, and then I'm going to end this stream right here, right now. We've been doing this for a while, and we got a hypnotic grifter, which is nothing big, that's on there. But everything's telling us that we've done enough for the day. So we ended up getting quite a few wins in our day. We ended up completing our midweek magic and taking our losses there. We ended up winning both of our standard games that we played with our constructed decks. Specifically, the Woodsy Artifact deck performed very, very well on both of them. We took the new deck and we fleshed it out a little bit, and we maybe greatly improved our Vran's Braids deck to make it even stronger by putting a Kaya up here at the top, which I'm really excited to start using, and by making just a little bit more synergy in the where's our, there he is, our zombie warrior here at the bottom. All new cards that we picked up from the stuff that we did, all definitely good in synergizing with the stuff that we've already got. So as far as being in that sort of constructed mode still of trying to, make do with very little, we're only finishing up day 3, and it just doesn't feel like we are not competitive. At this moment now, I would try to run the ladder with this deck for sure. I would try to run the ladder. And when I say run the ladder, what I mean by that, just to reiterate, is go into the ranked ladder and go up against other bronze players until I got to a point where I was getting my pants kicked. And so you get 2 pips to go up, and you only lose 1 pip when you go down. So it's really easy to climb in the ladder if you can go 50-50. You'll do it pretty quick. Obviously, if you can win 2 out of every 3, you can go up there very fast because you're only getting a -1 and you're getting a +4. So you should be able to fly through some of those bronze ranks if you can get to that 66% rank win. But it requires a pretty solid deck. I mean, the pros usually would come in there and do something like that. I know Crokies, who's incredible at this game, did a stream where he wanted to speed run through in order to see how fast he could go to take a brand new account from 0, get all the stuff out of the way, like the color challenges and stuff like that. Use the wild cards that they give you to build one specific deck. In this case, he did mono red, and it was very quick. He was just doing 4-minute matches with mono red and going through it as fast as he could. And he got all the way to Mythic in a 10-hour stream, one single stream straight through. And I thought that was pretty damn impressive overall. We're not doing it that way. We're going more like learn as you go, understand some of the thinking involved behind building each of these decks, and understanding how to utilize the free resources in the most effective way to create the largest collection. And that's kind of, I think, the enigma that I faced in the beginning. I invested money into the game, like the $5, and I didn't have nearly as good of powerful decks, nearly as good of a setup as we already have right now at the end of day 3. Our rare collection count is pretty high, if you ask me. If I just look at what's collected and what's rare, what you'll find is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34 on page 1. We're not going to count every page, but we've got 4 full pages, and if we're averaging 30 on each page, we have over 120 rares. And I think that that's really, really solid. as a place to start. You should be able to build maybe not one deck of 60 rare and above cards, but you should be able to build decks that utilize some of the more powerful commons and uncommons that kind of synergize with the rares in order to get the most amount out of each rare. I think that's one of the things that I learned when I first started this, was that a deck that has all rares in it can be very strong, but only if they're all talking to each other. If things like the Necrogen Communion aren't in your deck, but you've got Vran, you're not gaining as much out of your rare card as you could. Um, Having an extra card like a Thane, or whatever the case is, that gives -1 to everybody on the board and then helps you bring things out of the graveyard doesn't really work with a Vran as much as you think. It kind of weakens everything, and you better have something killer coming out of that graveyard. And if you don't, I'm not sure what you expect to happen. Take out cards like this, and only look at cards like this, and it's like a 4/4 for 4 that has the ability to help you cast lower costing things is great. But a lot of times I would much rather just have a 6/6 on the board, or a flyer that can grow to be a 4/4 or 6/6 very quickly, very easily. The Defiler Flesh has a place and it's strong, but it's not like the Necrosquito and the Necrotitan are not strong or do not have a place in the deck. So I think that rares with uncommons, or mythics with uncommons, is probably the sweet spot. But, you know, all these rares want you to sacrifice stuff. This thing wants to go out and kill things. But are you going to kill this? Are you going to kill this? Are you going to kill this? Like, you're not going to want to kill rare creatures. You're going to want to kill these guys down here, right? If this is your targets for your killing, well, then you don't want a deck that's completely made up of nothing but rares. So, you know, the sweet spot in the synergies are like kind of lie in the synergies of the deck, but built around the opportunities that you have with the rares that you were able to pick up and accomplish. I like what we've done here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different rare cards. I think 9 different rare cards in this deck. 10 if we include the mythic. 11 with the Wellspring. So out of 120 rares, you know, one thing that you can look at is to say, I've got 26 creatures and 10 non-creatures for a total of 36 cards that are not land. Out of 36 cards, 10 of them are mythic or rare. And that means that 1 out of 3 of these cards are exceptional. I wouldn't build too many decks. Like, I wouldn't probably say you need to have 30 rare cards to make a competitive deck. You can make a competitive deck with this easily, with 8 to 10 that synergize with the cards that are in between. We might be in a relatively sweet spot. There's another rare, 11. So, you know, I think we'll get stronger, but we'll get stronger because we'll get cards that require other rare cards to synergize with. And less common and uncommons. Also, having, you know, not like there can be only one sort of deck building strategy should help out quite a bit too, right? Because if you've got a good synergy with your Razor Lash, I'd much rather have more Razor Lashes than Jawbone Duelists, because a Jawbone Duelist is great, but he doesn't have that sort of bring back from the graveyard sort of mechanism built into it, right? So I would rather do that. I would rather have the Jawbone like the Incisor Glider in a white Corrupt deck with more Crawling Choruses than where they currently stand right now. But I wanted to be able to block something in the air if I needed to buy some time. And so I'm using this as a defensive card more than I'm using it as an offensive card. But those are the kinds of things, like not having to think that way and sort of spread out my synergies, you know, make them a little bit weaker, but instead kind of consolidate them into things that are just universally good at doing all of it, would be totally key. All right, that's the end of the stream. We are going to do this again tomorrow, most likely. I've got some work to get done today. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you later.